is very interesting to have this webinar today here on earth retaining structures in bridge and highway projects. The webinar organized by the Indian Association of Structural Engineers will be conducted by Mr. Rajiv Ahuja. Let me introduce Rajiv Ahuja, sir. He is a very well-known bridge engineer and having 40 years of experience in bridge and highway projects. He did his graduation from Punjab Engineering College, Chandigarh, and also a postgraduate diploma in structural engineering from the same university. And he did his MTech in soil mechanics and foundation engineering from IIT Delhi. After working in Central Water Commission as assistant director, he joined Stoop Consultants in 1982, where he was a bridge engineer. And later in 1992, he set up his own consultancy, Arch Consultancy Services Private Limited, and he offered his services for a large number of bridge and highway projects. It's very interesting. He sold his consultancy business in 2009 and joined GMR Bangalore in 2010 as a head. And again, he left very fast GMR in 2014 and has been working as independent consultant, offering his services to various construction companies. Presently, he is a member of the B2 committee of the IRC 6 and was actively involved in the preparation of the IRC SP 114 2018. His vast experience in design of a large number of bridge and highway projects includes many kinds of permanent and temporary works. We will surely benefit from his experience today. I request Alok Bhaumik sir, who is with us in the panel, to please give a welcome address. He is our president of the ISW.
Thank you, Anil, for your welcome address and introduction of my good friend and an eminent bridge engineer, Mr. Rajiv Ahuja. It is my proud privilege to welcome him today. Let me tell you, I know him since 1982, almost, more than 40 years, or around 40 years. We worked together since 1982 to 86 in Stoop Consultants. We were together, and thereafter, of course, we keep hitting each other at various places. I was a fresh engineer when I first interacted with him, and I tell you, he is one of the finest bridge engineers today in our country, who is very passionate with his job. And he is one of those, very rare extinct of bridge engineers who are working for contractors as a consultant. And those of you participants who are familiar with, a consultancy business with the contractors, you will know that it is a hardcore optimization studies that you need to do at each and every step to come out with an optimum design. Well, before I request Rajiv to take the floor, I wish to express my sincere thanks to Dr. Anil Sheth and her team for putting up this series of webinars, panel discussions, one after the other. Let me tell you, we have already organized 8 webinars, 1 panel discussion so far, and this is the 10th in the series. So far, during this, after post-lockdown, we have had 2,000 people participated in these webinars. We have 2 more webinars slotted for the month of July as of now. And also in the pipeline is a planning to organize a short course on fatigue design of bridges. So we have many other courses in the pipeline. I know that, under the best of circumstances, it would have been very difficult and challenging to ask to organize such webinars. And to do the same in these difficult circumstances is really indeed a tremendous achievement. I once again thank the team for this. My special thanks to Rajiv for sparing his valuable time today with us. and for sharing his knowledge. I also thank all the participants. They have been fantastic so far. Before I hand over the stage to Rajiv, I would like to just make one more appeal to all those of you, who are not yet members of our association. You may kindly consider taking membership and get all the benefits that the membership gives you in the long run. We are very soon, from the month of August, probably we will start, webinars which will be paid for non-members, and members will get it free. And there are a lot of things in the pipeline which as a member you will get benefited. With these few words, I hand over the floor to Rajiv to please deliver his presentation. Over to you, Rajiv. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
So, can I share my screen?
Yes, sir. You may share your screen.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Alok, for your nice words, and Dr. Anil Seth, who very painstakingly has organized this webinar. And thank you all the participants. It's a Sunday, and the response has been very good. See, the earth retaining structures are, I would call, these are not as glamorous as cable stayed bridges or other kinds of interesting bridges. These are ordinary structure, but the number is very large. What I find even in a design office, retaining structure do not, get the importance they deserve. I mean, most of the bridge engineers like to do difficult structure, and retaining structure like abutments and the retaining walls do not get the kind of attention they deserve.
But so there is a request to make it full screen presentation.
Okay.
Sorry to interrupt.
It's okay now?
No,
so,
yes, sir.
So I'm going to cover these following topics. See, one is the types of retaining wall. You will be surprised to know there is a very large variety of retaining walls, and I might have still missed a few. Then earth pressure theories, which are commonly used for non-seismic and seismic situation. And then seismic effects on soil mass resting on heel, typical earth pressure diagram, then design aspects, external stability, and structural design aspect I will cover only for cantilever retaining wall, because otherwise the presentation become too long. Then drainage aspects, which is generally ignored by our engineers. Then modes of failure, what are the causes of failure, and shrinkage and thermal cracks, and how to avoid shrinkage and thermal cracks. Now, what is a retaining structure? See, as the name suggests, the retaining wall is a structure that is designed and constructed to withstand lateral pressures, which could be due to earth filling, liquid pressure, sand, and other granular materials behind the retaining wall structure. And what are the retaining earth retaining structure? These include, of course, retaining walls and other structures which retain not only the earth, but also serve as structures to resist other external loads, such as vertical loads and horizontal load transferred from superstructure. See, earth retaining structures have a very wide application in bridge and highway engineering. The quantity and cost of such structure can be very large, particularly in highway projects where such structures are in hundreds and sometimes even more than the cost of major bridges. These are also used for slope stability purpose in hilly areas by the side of a road, and also used as a retaining earth to retain the earth during construction phase like sheet piling. So if you look at the types of earth retaining structure, I have listed 15 types. See, first one is general purpose retaining walls, and then we have retaining wall in approach ramps of underpass and flyovers, and cantilever abutments with superstructure supported on bearings. Then abutments can be integral with superstructure. We have box type abutment, box type return walls. We have cantilever return wall, cantilever wing walls, we have toe walls, VUPs and PUV, basically underpasses, which also act as a earth retaining structure. Then we have box type minor bridges, box culverts, U-shaped drains, reinforced soil walls, sheet piles, then pile retaining wall, diaphragm walls. Broadly, conventionally, retaining wall have been classified as gravity walls and cantilever and counterfort type walls. Gravity, as the name suggests, these are constructed in PCC, stone masonry, brick masonry, gabions, and the stability comes from the weight. These are not reinforced, but the stability comes from the weight. Whereas cantilever, counterfort, and buttress wall are constructed generally in RCC. We have a base slab, and the slab on the backfill side is called heel, and the front side is toe. We may have if the height is not large, say up to 8 or 10 meters, we may have a simple cantilever wall. Otherwise, it can be stiffened by counterforts. Now, counterforts can be provided on the rear side, then we call it counterfort wall. And these can also be provided on the opposite side of earthfill, and then we call it buttress wall. You see some samples here, like gabion gravity walls, which are provided by the side of the road. And these are massive earth retaining structure and also help in arresting the landslides. Cantilever RCC wall, all of you are very familiar. And masonry buttress wall are more common, I think, in building structures. In counterfort, we have generally front counterfort starting from top to bottom. The advantage of counterfort is the front wall is stiffened, and this is then designed spanning across these counterforts. Counterforts sometimes are given on the front side also. If the heel span is quite large, then these are given on both the sides. Retaining walls can be precast also. Obviously, weight and height will be limitation. Base slab can be cast in situ, and the retaining wall comprising stem and wall can be precast. On left hand side, you see counterfort and a wall are precast together, whereas on right hand side, this is a hollow panel, and because the height is more to manage the weight, it can be made hollow, and the cage is lowered inside subsequently and then concreted. Here you can see pictures of some precast retaining walls. And this is done in India also, especially in box culvert structure, which have very large number in a highway jobs. And the height of retaining wall is limited to 4 or 5 meters. And since the number is large, these can be standardized and these can be precast. This has been done in our country also. Another type is anchored retaining wall. As the name suggests, the wall fascia is anchored into the hill. Anchors are driven into the material with boring, then are expanded at the end, either by mechanical means or often by injecting pressurized concrete, which expands to form a bulb in the soil. Now, these are constructed when the space is limited or cutting of the existing slope is to be avoided. Then anchored retaining wall is suitable for loose soil over rocks. You may have an existing formation of rocks. You want to construct a retaining wall and you are not able to provide conventional retaining wall. Then anchored retaining walls can be provided. And these can be considerably high retaining wall can be constructed using this type. Deep cable rods or tie backs are driven into the earth and then the ends are filled with concrete. Anchors act against overturning and sliding pressure. You can see a finished anchor retaining wall. It looks quite nice and the height is also substantial. Another type is L-shaped cantilever wall, though not very common. See, left-hand side, you will see this is used to widen the existing formation. There is an existing formation, you widen at the top, and but you cannot excavate behind, so you can provide a L-shaped retaining wall. Right-hand side, the slab is below the earth fill. Here also, you cannot excavate for some reason on the front side, and L shape can be adopted. The only thing is there's a limitation because it cannot be very high, because the base slab will be to design a proper cantilever wall, you need a heel slab, you also need a toe slab. Now in this case, on right hand side, you can see a RE wall and you can see the bulging in some of the panels. These panels have been now stabilized by soil nailing, but still to safeguard against any, coming out of any panel, a L-shaped retaining wall has been constructed. This is a real example. And the space was limited already. There is a service road and traffic was moving on the top. So within the limited space of 3 meters, this L-shaped retaining wall has been constructed and on pile foundations. Retaining walls also have openings for passage of water, either through a culvert or a minor bridge. So these things happen frequently in many projects. See, RE wall or mechanically stabilized, these are Gabion walls which are mechanically stabilized. These are basically RE wall, but the fascia is Gabion. And these look very nice in a rural environment, not popular in urban environment. And in Sikkim airport, McAfee has designed a similar wall for a height of 70 meters, but a small height for 70 meters. These are conventional RE wall you must have seen, and these are provided in approaches behind the abutment and highways where ROW is restricted and service roads are provided. RE wall are very cheap compared to normal RCC wall, and especially when the length is very long, and that's why these have become very popular. But there are many problems also which people are facing. This is a typical RE wall. You can see the abutment pier, and just behind that, there's a long RE wall. We have longitudinal walls, you know, one on this end and other is on the other side. And what you see here is a cross wall. And this is 47.5 meter wide. This is for a 6-lane highway. And in the end, you will see a crash barrier with a friction slab and crash barrier with a friction slab on both sides. So there are some issues with this detailing, which I will discuss later. This is a cross-section through the approach ramp. And you can also see ground improvement. And this issue also is very important, ground improvement, because in number of situations, we do not find a good subsoil strata, and this has to be done. This is a finished RE wall. It has a very long length. In fact, when the highway passes through towns, you don't have enough space. And viaducts are very costly, and their RE wall has become very popular. You can have service road on both sides. And these have been constructed for a very large length, 3 kilometer, 4 kilometer also. Then hilly areas, yes, this is very popular. This is known as a breast wall when it comes to hilly areas. If there is a road, then we have to construct on both sides to stabilize the slopes, and so that there is no landsliding. In embankments, right of way is a problem these days. You want to have now mostly road projects are 6-lane, and eventually these will be widened to 8-lane. The space is a problem. And because of a large number of VUP, PUP flyovers, the height of the embankment is also very large. I mean, it may vary from say 8 meter to even 12 meter, 15 meter. And the space required to accommodate the slopes may be very large. It may not be even available also. And then you may have service road on both sides. So the retaining wall become integral part of a embankment. If, as you can see, there is a service road here. This is a retaining wall either as a RE wall or RCC structure. And on this side, there is a no service road. A small retaining wall, popularly called as toe wall, has been provided. Another application of retaining wall is, in approaches to underpass, having a shape, a U shape. There you see the width is only 8 meter, and this is the approach to a underpass. And the advantage of U shape is the walls are to be designed only for earth pressure and surcharge. But when you come at the base, the movements from both sides nullifies, and then this has to be designed only for the vertical weight. And in case of underpasses, if the water table is high, these have to be designed for uplift pressure. And that's why you see almost 2.5 to 3 meter thick base. And this doesn't solve the problem, then you will have to go for soil anchors or rock anchors. This is another interesting application. This structure is a real structure, and as an approach to a major bridge, and the subsoil is clay, soft clay, and there was no other option but to provide piles. So you can see each side retaining wall is supported on a row of pile, and then there's a longitudinal beam, and at every pile location, this is connected through a tie beam. And this, because of tie beam, the thrust is transferred to the tie beam as a tension, and the piles have to be designed only for movement. Not everywhere piles are provided. Wherever possible, ground improvement can be done. And this shows ground improvement with stone piles. And these days, there is a lot of focus on liquefaction. So even below simple structure like VUP, retaining wall, we may have liquefaction. And liquefaction, if the depth is limited, say by a couple of meters, you can replace the soil. But if it is maybe 6 or 10 meters, it will be difficult to design the retaining wall. So retaining walls is not a purely a structural problem. One has to, look at it from geotechnical consideration also and do the needful. Then box structure in highways are also a retaining wall, serve as a retaining wall, and these include vehicular underpass, then pedestrian underpass, cattle underpass, minor bridges, box culvert, and utility culverts. So typically, VUPs are constructed over crossroads, and the standard dimensions are 12 meter wide and 5.5 meter vertical. These are clear dimensions. And these can be single cell, twin cell, depending on the width of the crossroad. Pedestrian underpass normally have a dimension of 7 meter wide and 3 meter vertical clearance. And cattle underpass also have a width of 7 meter, but the clearance may be 3 to 4.5 meter, depending on the type of animals which might use this underpass. Like if one is expecting elephants to cross, then clear height will be even more than this. Here you on left hand side in key plan, you see a box kind of structure. And then on left hand side, you see the wing wall. The wing walls are supplied generally at 45 degree. And on right hand side, you see a return wall, which is parallel to the traffic direction. Now the purpose of either return wall or a wing wall is to contain the other embankment. See the wing wall totally contains the embankment and nothing is spilling, beyond this. Whereas in return wall, you will always find this embankments spill taking a, quadrant. We call it a quadrant. It is taking a shape of a quadrant. And if you see here, this shows a box with return wall, and you can see the soil spill here at a slope of 1.5:1. This can be 2:1. And the length of the return wall basically is decided by multiplying this slope with the height difference between the formation level and the ground level. Whereas wing wall is splayed and it keeps reducing in height, and near ground level, it can have a minimum height. These are some pictures of completed VUPs and PUPs. And as you can see, these vertical walls also retain the earth. And then you have supplied wing walls over here. Box type manual bridges typically have a span of more than 6 meter and length less than 60 meter as per IRC definition. Such bridges may be single cell or multi-cell box structure. Box culverts mostly are buried and have earth cushion on top, but in some cases, top slab is at formation level of a road. This can be single cell or multiple cell. Then utility culverts or ducts also provided as box section sometime. The width of these culverts may vary from 1.5 meter to less than 6 meter, and height is also variable, 1.5 to 4 meters. These are pictures of some completed box culverts, and you can see, wing walls over here, and these wing walls can be very long also. Even U-shaped drains are also designed at earth retaining structure, especially in highway jobs when there's a built-up area. Then between service road and built-up area, these U-shaped drains are constructed with a typical height of say 1 meter. And at some location where the discharge is very high, even large-sized U-shaped drains are constructed. Toe walls are very small height walls. These are generally constructed in PCC or stone masonry and widely used in highway projects where ROW is restricted. Length may run in several kilometers, sometimes all along the highway in some cases. I have seen contractor while bidding for a job, they have not considered toe walls, or maybe nobody gave them the quantities. And while designing the structure, they found the length was in kilometers. Toe walls are also used at the edge of the quadrant pitching, which we discussed just now. This is an abutment, this is a return wall, and earth is spilling in the shape of a quadrant. And this, since the height is substantial, this is protected through a stone pitching. And at the edge, we provide a toe wall to prevent slippage and spreading of the soil. Sheet pile walls are also very common. These are suitable for supporting deep excavation during construction, providing protection to existing structure during construction. If you are doing excavation in a built-up area, you have to protect the buildings. And building cofferdams is a very important application in river for construction of well-oblique pile foundation. Sheet piles can be cantilever for small heights, say up to 5 to 6 meters. And if the height of excavation is large, this can be anchored at the back. Then sheet pile material can be timber, RCC, or steel. Behavior analysis design of sheet pile is quite complex. Here you see an example of sheet pile being used as a cofferdam. The sheet pile has been driven and a cofferdam has been created, because when you want to sink the well in the river, which has a standing height of maybe 4, 5, 6 meters, you have to create an island. It's a normal practice, and sheet piles are used here, and well sinking can then be taken up. On left hand side, you see sheet piles. This is supporting the existing bridge. If you are constructing a new bridge by the side of old bridge and very close to it, then excavation has to be done for casting the foundation and abutments. And the existing formation is protected through sheet piles. This is an example of a large bridge where sheet piles have been used for casting the foundations. Another type is secant and contiguous pile walls. Now, secant pile walls are formed by constructing intersecting reinforced concrete pile. So you can see here, these are called primary piles, which are cast in stage 1. And once these are cast, then secondary piles are cast with a reinforcement or a structural steel section. And then this becomes a full wall. These are provided where sheet piles can resist the high earth pressure. And if these are to be used as a permanent structure, one can provide waterproofing as well as a concrete wall. Now, contiguous piles are a little different. These piles have a little gap in between. These consist of piles arranged in a line typically with a 150 millimeter gap between the piles. The soil between the piles can be stabilized using grouting technique if necessary, either before or after pile installation. Here you can see the completed pile wall, and left hand side shows schematically how these are constructed. So primary piles are constructed first, as you can see here, and then secondary pile with the reinforcement are constructed subsequently. Diaphragm wall basically is a continuous wall constructed in ground to facilitate certain construction activities, such as to support deep excavation or as a permanent retaining wall. Diaphragm wall is constructed using a trench excavated in ground and supported by bentonite or similar fluid until the mud is replaced by concrete after the steel cage installation. The construction of diaphragm wall is more or less similar to board cast in situ pile. The diaphragm wall can be constructed up to a depth of even 60 or 70 meters. So schematically, this picture shows how it is constructed. The first step is to construct a guide wall. Now, guide wall is constructed for the entire length, and it has a clear dimension of thickness of the diaphragm wall, which may be 600 to 1.2 meters. And then panel by panel construction is done. See, first one panel is taken, which may have a width of 2 to 4 meters, and it is the excavation is done through a clamshell or a grab, and end stoppers are also provided. So once it has been excavated, then cage is lowered and it is completed, and then space is left for the between this one and the next one to be taken up. Once alternate panels are constructed, then intermediate panels are constructed subsequently. In bridges, apart from temporary construction, these are also used as a permanent structure. In an underpass where the space is very limited, especially in urban areas, the diaphragm walls can be used as a retaining structure for the underpass. These are also used if in an integral bridges where the abutment is a wall type and space is a problem, then diaphragm wall can be used as a abutment also. And as we know, apart from this, diaphragm walls are very common in underground structures like station, parking, etc., etc. This picture is for an underpass in Ludhiana. And when you look at it, you can't make out that diaphragm wall has been constructed here. The most common retaining wall structure in bridges is obviously abutments. Abutments are the structure which support superstructure either on bearings or maybe integral with superstructure, normally constructed along with the return wall, wing wall, which we had discussed just now. Abutments can be non-spill through, these can be spill through, these may rest on open foundation, pile foundation, well foundation. We have box type abutment supporting structure on bearings, then even box type structures can be integral with very large cantilever superstructure. You can see in this picture, this is the abutment and these are the wing walls, these are the return walls. We have discussed this. This is the simplest of the abutment on open foundation. And as you can see in this view, this is a wall, front wall, and then we have side walls, return wall or wing wall. And here you see the earth slope surrounding these wing walls. This is another example where wing walls have been constructed in line with the abutment, and this top slope is same as slope of the embankment. Butterfly wing walls are also very common. Actually, the length of, you need not construct the full length of the return wall. You can construct it partly, which is integrated with the base slab. And then in the end, 3 to 4 meter length can be constructed as a butterfly wing wall, because the soil spills start from the edge. And when it slopes, this part gets buried. And from outside, you will never know whether it's a butterfly wing wall or a full retaining wall. Highways are constructed in cutting, and their overpasses may have to be constructed. And there, this retaining structure can be as small as just a bed block, if the rock is very good. And depending on the quality of the rock, the depth can be decided. And if quality is very poor, the depth can be substantial. Then we have bank seat abutments. These are suitable for small spans only. Why we call bank seat abutment? This bank seat is resting on a earth fill. Now, this earth fill can be normal earth fill. In this case, it is a RE wall, but this is suitable only for small span because the bearing capacity here will be limited, and even the RE wall or retaining wall has to be designed for this surcharge. So spans are limited, but it looks very nice. In this case, retaining structure or abutment is RCC and superstructure is resting behind. Here you can see some examples of bank seat abutments, and this is a RE wall in all longitudinally as well as in transverse direction. In this case, the superstructure span is very large and the loads are very heavy. It's not possible to rest the, on earth fill. So an independent structure is created. These are just like piers, normal piers. And just behind that, retaining structure is created. We have 2 longitudinal walls and 1 transverse wall. And you might have noticed this kind of construction is very, very common in our country now, especially in flyovers and ROBs. We have another type, integral abutments. Now in integral abutment, as the name suggests, superstructure is integrated with the vertical wall. And it becomes a indeterminate structure. It may have an open foundation, it may be supported on pile foundation, or it may be just outside the RE wall. And sometimes it is supported on single row pile or embedded wall abutment, which is normally constructed as a diaphragm wall. Abutments can be non-spill through and spill through. Now, what is non-spill through? Non-spill through means this is a wall type and the road formation stops here and the side spill cannot go beyond the abutment. So that's why we call it a non-spill through. In spill through, we have piers over here and there are openings between the piers and the earth spills through those openings and takes this shape. We call it spill through abutment. Now, why spill through abutment? Because sometimes earth pressures can be very large. If you construct a solid structure, then it may be difficult to design the abutment, especially when they rest on pile foundation or open foundation. When you make it spill through, then you relieve the earth pressure partly. This is another example where abutment is constructed on pile foundation. Then it has a return wall behind that. You can see butterfly wing wall. If you take a section here, it's a U-shaped structure, which is quite economical. So this is a combination of return wall on open foundation and then pile abutment on pile foundation, and it's a non-spill through. This is another example of non-spill through abutment where return walls are integrated with the abutment. So at the base, it's a U-shaped structure. When height is very large, walls are stiffened through counterforts. You can see a series of counterforts because the width is very large. But these days, most of the contractors I have found, they don't want to construct counterfort, even if it is economical. The emphasis is more on speed. In fact, I know, I will show you one slide just now where the height is 20 meters and it is being constructed as a solid wall. Abutments are constructed on well foundation also. In this case, you see there's a well foundation. The well cap is larger than the dia of the well to support the entire superstructure. The wall width is same as width of formation. And this is constructed in the center, and a part of return wall is also constructed over the well cap. In this case, if you notice carefully, the abutment is shifted. This is not constructed at the center. This is rather constructed at the edge. And well cap also has been projected. Now, why do we do this? Because well foundation are designed, especially abutment well foundations are designed as a retaining structure, where the difference between formation level and founding level may be 25 to even 40 meters also. So this is a very, very large height, though this is resisted by the passively from the opposite side. But to reduce the active earth pressure, the abutment is constructed eccentrically with respect to center line. And because of this eccentric weight, it provides a moment opposite to the active earth pressure moments. This shows a 20-meter high abutment wall. And there's one bridge on left-hand side, another carriageway on right-hand side. In between, we have a median wall. And this height is almost 20 meters and resting on pile foundation. And it's also a non-spill through because we tried to, provide spill through, but client refused. They only wanted non-spill through. And the thrust on each pile is very large. For a normal situation, it is 100 ton. And for seismic, it is almost 150 ton per pile. You can see another section of 20-meter high wall on pile foundations. These are being constructed right now. And even while these are constructed, abutment cap is complete and girders are being erected. Another application is box type return wall. Here you see well foundation, then you see a abutment pier. It's not a wall type abutment, it's a pier as you can see here. And just behind that, a retaining structure has been created. So this is a hollow retaining structure which serves as a retaining wall, return wall. Now why hollow? Because the bearing capacity here is very low. This height is substantial and it cannot be solid fill. So to reduce the base pressure, this has been made hollow. But another problem is, since it has to retain the earth, so this first compartment at least has to be filled up with soil so that it provides a stabilizing movement. Here you see pictures of a spill-through abutment. It has 3 piers and these are the opening through which earth spills. This is a abutment cap. These are butterfly wing walls and these are dirt walls. Left-hand side, you see the finished structure. Sometimes abutments are constructed on piles, single row piles. These piles can be taken right up the top, up to the bottom of the abutment cap. And in that case, this also becomes a spill-through abutments. Here you see another type abutment on pile foundation, and its left-hand side you can see only 2 piers have been provided. And part of return wall is also constructed here. And just behind that there is a return wall and soil is spilling through this. And in this case, it has a launching apron. Now these abutments when provided over river bridges, now rivers are scourable. So to protect the abutment against scour, we have to provide a launching apron. And in that particular case, the scour level is taken at the base of the pile cap or well cap because this is totally protected. This is a bridge on river Ganga in UP. It has 2 independent carriageway and 2 independent wells, and each well is supporting a spill-through abutment. This is a completed view of spill-through abutments. These are superstructure. You can see only dirt wall here. The abutment cap is also hidden, and this is well protected all around. The spill-through abutments are quite useful in reducing the earth pressure substantially. But adequate protection has to be provided so that there is no scour. Another interesting application is box type, counterweight type apartments, generally provided in hilly areas. See, in hilly areas, you will find you don't have a space behind. After crossing this bridge, you have to take a turn left side or right hand side immediately. So the popular technique is you construct a huge abutment, and this is constructed as a cantilever from both sides. In between, you can have a suspended span or a central hinge. Now you can imagine this span can be as large as 130, 140 meter. This has been constructed in our country. And because of large cantilever and traffic load on top of that, introduces very high overturning moments, and add to this the earth pressure from behind, and then the seismic forces acting in this direction. The earth pressures are tremendous. The movements are very, very high, which are balanced by this abutment. This is another bridge in Sikkim, constructed by same technique. So this is a line diagram, and in plan, you can see this particular abutment is 11 meter wide and 17.75 meter long, and these are even much bigger than this. It has vertical walls in both direction, basically a cellular abutment. This is the elevation, and first two compartments are filled with soil to balance the large overturning movements. And many a time these are anchored to the ground through pre-stressing if the movements are not manageable by gravity alone. This is a bridge on Jammu-Udhampur rail link, I think, which has been published several times. It has a span of 102 meter, and on both sides 71 meter span. The interesting thing is it has a free bearing on piers as well as on right side abutment. The fixity is provided on the left hand side. This is the enlarged view of abutment. You can see pier here, and the fixity is here. The entire bridge, which is almost 240 meter long, is anchored here. And this helped in reducing the earthquake forces. And to retain the earth from behind, a box type retaining structure has been created. And this was a very innovative idea in year 2000 when several bridges were constructed on Jammu-Udhampur rail link. And I think this system was adopted in at least 3 bridges. We have seen a large variety of earth retaining structure, and there may be many more, but all these have a common factor. These have to be designed for lateral earth pressure. There are many theories. Typically, lateral earth pressure include active earth pressure due to retained earth and surcharge, earth pressure at rest due to retained earth and surcharge, then passive earth pressure due to earth and surcharge, active earth pressure under seismic condition, passive earth pressure under seismic condition, then hydrostatic pressure in combination with earth pressure. And there are some other causes of also lateral earth pressure. Now, active earth pressure develops, as we all know, when the retaining wall deflects laterally away from the soil behind as a cantilever, causing formation of failure planes in the retained soil. If the wall displacement is sufficient, the lateral pressure reaches plastic equilibrium, and the wall pressure at this stage is termed as active pressure. Passive earth pressure develops if the wall is pushed against the wall, causing slip planes to develop. Extent of lateral earth pressure depends on the extent of deflection of wall. Now, this slide shows, how it develops. You see here figure A, which is an in situ condition, and you see this line, this imaginary line with zero movement. And in any in situ condition, if you take a soil element here, you have a vertical pressure, that is gamma z, which we call sigma 1, and then lateral confining pressure sigma 3. So this state is known as earth pressure at rest. Now, if this wall deflects, if you excavate in the front, obviously this wall will deflect. And because of the deflection, that sigma 3 reduces. And as you increase the deflection, sigma 3 reduces substantially, and failure plane develops. This failure plane is at 45 plus 5 by 2. And when the deflections are small, then the active pressure is also small. And beyond a limit, then this is the maximum active pressure it can reach. Passive relief is, it's a opposite phenomena. Here sigma 1 remains same as in case of active pressure. but sigma 3 is increased. And when you increase the sigma 3 at a certain deflection, inward deflection, the failure takes place. This is a failure plane. And typically for a horizontal surface, the angle is 45 minus 5 by 2. Now, what is K? K is basically a ratio of sigma 3 by sigma 1. The sigma 1 is overburden, vertical pressure, and sigma 3 is a lateral pressure. So this is just a ratio. And then sigma 3 can be written as K sigma 1, whether it's active, earth pressure at rest, or passive. It can be written like that. That is K into gamma H. This picture shows the variation of, active and passive earth pressure. This solid line at 0 shows a in situ condition when it is a at rest condition. Now, if this wall moves forward and beyond a certain delta, active pressure will develop, but in between, this will lie between earth pressure at rest and active earth pressure. Similarly, for passive relief also, if the displacement is quite large, then only passive pressure will develop. And in between, the value will lie somewhere in between. There are some guidelines, though our code doesn't give any guideline, but in AASHTO and Bowles book, there are certain guidelines and how much should be delta, so that beyond that, active pressure develops. And this is not only a deflection, this also includes foundation rotation. Now, when we design earth pressure structures, we need to assess earth pressure, and there are many theories, and the most common theory is Coulomb active earth pressure, which was developed in 1776. Now, the Coulomb theory, if you see this failure wedge here, which we discussed just now, you can see arrow mark here. Now, this is a wall friction, and this line shows the failure plane, and there is a friction along this failure plane also, typically sigma tangent phi, and this is the weight. So in Coulomb theory, we consider wall friction along this surface. That is a major difference between Coulomb theory and Rankine theory. Another thing is, if the back face is sloping, then Coulomb theory includes this also in its equation. As you can see, phi is angle of internal friction, alpha is angle of wall along with the vertical, and delta is angle of wall friction, typically 2/3 of phi. And the lateral active earth pressure is then given by Ka gamma H. In Rankine theory, delta is 0. It doesn't consider the wall friction, and the back face is also vertical, and this is the equation. But it does consider beta value, that is the slope of the earth. And if you take beta 0, alpha 0, delta 0, then the value of coefficient is, active coefficient is 1 minus sin phi divided by 1 sin phi, and it is same as given by Coulomb's theory. This is the equation for passive relief, and I will just skip this. Now, earth pressure at rest develops when the wall does not deflect, being sufficiently rigid or not able to deflect, like in closed box structure with a EP acting from both sides. So in a box type structure, earth pressure is acting from both sides, and if the filling is done parallelly from both sides, and if there is no rotation, then this is a active pressure at rest. Certain counterfort type retaining wall, where the stiffness is quite high, may also fall under this category, depending on deflection and rotation of wall. If the wall is stiffened and is resting on rocky terrain, then the deflections will be very small, and one cannot take active earth pressure here. For intermediate deflection, earth pressure will lie between active and at rest pressure. Typically, coefficient of at rest pressure is 0.5 for phi equal to 30 degree. In addition to earth pressure due to retained fill, we also have a surcharge, either permanent surcharge or live load surcharge. In bridge structure, as per IRC, live load surcharge equal to 1.2 meter height of earth is specified for design of apartments. Whereas in case of retaining walls, that is return wall or wing wall, if these are within 3 meters of traveled road, that is within 3 meters of paved shoulder, these have to be designed for live load surcharge, otherwise not. And earth pressure due to surcharge is given by KQ. K can be active, passive, or at rest, and Q can be permanent or live load, permanent or due to live load. And if it is due to live load, then as per IRC, this value is 1.2 meter height of earth into density of earth, that is 24 kilonewton per square meter. Now, Coulomb and Rankine did not include, for cohesive soil, C was not included. And Bell in 1915 gave this equation. So this Ka gamma Z can be either Coulomb or Rankine. And this has to be reduced by 2C under root Ka. Similarly, for passive relief, this has to be added. Now, if we compare these two theories, in general, Coulomb's theory applies where wall interferes with the backfill, that is wall friction is considered, that is delta. And Rankine theory is applied when there is no interference of wall with backfill, wall friction is not considered. That means the back face is assumed as a smooth face with delta equal to 0. Obviously, Rankine theory is more conservative and it's used for its simplicity, particularly for design of low heights wall. However, Coulomb theory is more widely used for bridges in our country and also recommended in IRC 6. This table shows a comparison of coefficients obtained by Coulomb as well as Rankine theory. Now, alpha is angle with the back face measures with the vertical. I have taken two examples, 0 and 5. For 0 and for beta 0, that is top face is horizontal, it is 0.297. And if the top face is sloping, say 25 degree, which is close to 2:1 slope, it shoots up to 0.487. In Rankine, it is 0.33 and 0.4936. Now, if back wall is sloping, even with 5 degree, the coefficient has increased to 0.332 and 0.553. Now, Rankine has no provision for alpha. So one has to use, one has to use Coulomb theory in that case. Earth pressure at rest is always 1 minus sine phi, and for 30 degree, it will remain 0.5. Passive pressure for Coulomb, it is 6.1 and 5.1. And very, very high if the passive side has a upward slope of 25 degrees. These are realistically high value and these will never develop. The passive relief will never be more than the active pressure. In Rankine, passive coefficient is very low, just 3. And if beta is 25, then Rankine theory does not give correct result. It gives wrong results. So as you can see, Coulomb theory is more realistic. We may have a case where earth fill is submerged or there may be a water table. Now, if the drainage arrangements are not provided, it's a solid wall without any weep holes, then the pressure develops due to two reasons. One is due to earth fill with its submerged unit weight, that is Ka, gamma, B and H, plus fully hydrostatic pressure, gamma, W into H, as you can see on this side. And if there are adequate drainage, like weep holes, etc., then only first diagram has to be used, that is Ka, but with gamma S, saturated soil, and H, height. There may be other reasons for lateral pressure, like ice formation. Lateral pressures can develop when the pore water in the backfill freezes. Then swelling pressure, if the retaining wall backfill is an expensive clay whose water content increases beyond that at the time of placement, it can expand and produce very large lateral wall pressure. So it's very, very important for a designer to clearly give specification in the drawing that clays should not be filled up, only granular material with a particular design value of phi, free draining material meeting MOST specification. All that should be very, very clearly defined in the drawings. Otherwise, there may be trouble. Then there can be thrust due to temperature. Like in integral bridges, the top deck expands and pushes the wall against the earth fill, and that may increase the earth pressure. And there can be, interestingly, lateral pressure due to over-compaction. I have seen in RE wall, if the heavy roller is used just behind the RE wall, this adds to the earth pressure and it can be much higher than what it has been designed for. That's why the plate compactor or light roller should be used behind the retaining walls. And that also has to be, specified in the drawings. We have to be very particular about the fill. In a gravity wall, the fill starts from the edge at a 45 plus 5 by 2. And if the top is sloping, this angle may be even less. The extent of filling will be more. It need not be 45 plus 5 by 2, it will be less. And typically in a cantilever wall which has a heel slab, this filling has to start, this angle has to be measured from the edge of the heel, not from here. It has to be taken from here. So this has to be clarified in the drawings. And all the specifications are given in 78, IRC 78 and MORTH guidelines. This diagram show application of earth pressure diagram. If you have to design a stem, then the earth pressure will be acting at the face of the stem. But for the external stability, like base pressure, overturning, sliding, this has to be taken at the edge. And this height will be much more than this height if the top face is sloping. And this diagram shows, earth pressure due to surcharge along with the triangular diagram. If you have a water table somewhere in between, then earth pressure diagram will look like this. This first diagram is due to surcharge. And this triangular diagram is basically gamma D into H1. The gamma D is a dry density, H1 is this height, and this is taken down to the bottom. And for this height, which is a submerged soil, we will add gamma submerged into H2. And since there is no proper draining arrangement, hydrostatic pressure will also be added, gamma W into H2. And if other side is typically well compacted and there is no chance of, removal of this soil, then one can consider passive relief also. In a box structure, we have two kind of situation. Here, this top surface matches with the FRL, formation level, and this is the active pressure and this is a live load surcharge. But if it is buried, and most of the, in fact, culverts are buried, and this cushion, earth cushion, acts as a surcharge, and because of this surcharge, earth pressure diagram is a combination of, pressure to surcharge as well as retained earth, and with live load surcharge acting from both sides. Here we will take active pressure at rest. In integral structure, as we discussed, this deck expands and it pushes the soil. It has to be first designed for earth pressure at rest. The important thing is after the construction, filling has to be done parallelly from both sides. If you do from one side, the behavior will be different. Now, earth pressure at rest is shown here. In coefficient, and this is known as K star. Now, this coefficient lies between K0, earth pressure at rest coefficient, and passive. It is not as high as passive, much less than passive, but much higher than earth pressure at rest. So, if you see this diagram, the code, our IRC SP11, there is a code IRC SP115 for this, and also there is a British code. Up to the mid height, it has to be taken like this. That is, this is H by 2 into gamma into K star, and it has to be dropped down vertically till it meets the K0 diagram, and this is the final earth pressure diagram. In the embedded wall, it is more or less similar, except that H by 2 is replaced by 2H by 3. Now, for a typical open foundation, which provides fixity at the base, this K is given by D by 0.05 H raised to power 4 into Kp, but this value will not be less than K0. Now, if you take phi 30 degree, H our code limits the movement of structure to plus minus 20 millimeter, which means normally you cannot construct more than 60 meter for this kind of displacement. And for full height embedded wall, then this increases.
I think there is a problem, but we'll come back soon. Just 1 minute. I think it may be loss of connection. Just 1 minute. We'll come back.
So sorry, I got disconnected. Can you hear me, please?
Yes, sir. We can hear you and see you. I have also made you the host, so you will be able to share.
Okay, fine.
Yeah.
Okay, we were somewhere here.
Yes, sir.
Normally for calculating active earth pressure, we take phi. Can you hear me, please?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Oh. Can you hear? Oh, okay, you can hear me. So normally we take phi equal to 30 or 35 degree, but when you are compacting the soil, in layer by layer and 5% of Proctor density, the actual phi may be much more. It may be even 40 or 45 degree. Now, when we calculate active earth pressure, we calculate for 30 or 35 degrees. So even if actual phi is 40, 45 degree, it doesn't matter because we are on conservative side. But in this particular case, if our phi is higher than 30, the passive pressure coefficient can increase substantially. So we have to be very careful. It's not always, correct to take phi equal to 30 or 35 degree. At site, it may be more, and in this particular, it will add to the pressure. Then we have a well foundation, and it's a very tricky business because well foundation have a very large retained height. Because time is short, I will just explain quickly. This is a active pressure diagram due to surcharge. And as per our code, this has to be limited to the bottom of well cap or even top where the filled up soil is there. Because surcharge will keep reducing as you go down, and that's why code has limited up to here. This is Ka into Q. And then this is another layer. This is a maximum scour level, and this layer has a different property, different phi, different Ka. And for this layer, this is a triangular diagram, that is Ka into gamma, and this height. And as you transfer it till bottom, here the K is different. Since K is different, so that's why this shape is different. This has to be modified in ratio of these two K. In this case, this soil is dry, so you see gamma D into H into Ka, and then add pressure due to submerged soil. This is submerged, we will use gamma B here. And then when it is transferred to the bottom, then this is modified in ratio of the K. Now this is all active earth pressure. Add to this the moment transferred through horizontal forces from the abutment. These are external movement. Now the passive relief as per IRC 78 is taken like this. This is a passive relief diagram below maximum scour level, and this is an active pressure diagram below scour level. We take the difference of two like this, say 1/6 Kp minus Ka gamma B, H4 is this height, cube divided by factor of safety. And that this is known as a grip length, and normally grip length is provided to balance all the external movements so that at the base you only have vertical load. This is a very standard practice. If you have a clay strata, then if you remember, the earth pressure will be Ka gamma Z minus 2C under root K. So second term is negative. And for some height, it's negative part is more than the first part. And this happens in C5 soil, and top will be, will have cracks like this. And this is dotted line shows the diagram in a clay strata. And this is due to water, if there is some water. While working out earth pressure because of this, there are two simplifications. You take this as Ka gamma Z minus 2C under root Ka, and then join it from the top. And then here, the soil which has cracked, you treat this as a surcharge and then draw the earth pressure diagram. Now, seismic situation also we will discuss. In a seismic situation, there will be inertia. Now I'm talking of abutment or retaining walls. The inertia forces, there will be inertia forces on structural components depending on the coefficient of, depending on horizontal seismic coefficient. Then there will be increased lateral earth pressure, including static and dynamic component of earth pressure due to inertia forces AH/AV on W weight of failure zone. See, there is a failure wedge, which I showed you. Now, if the weight of failure wedge is multiplied by AH, that gives a horizontal inertia force, and AV, that is vertical coefficient, may act in either direction. It can upward or downward, so it's taken as a plus minus, and then the equations are modified. The inertia forces on soil mass resting on hillside of base slab. In abutments, inertia forces transferred from superstructure. Active and passive pressure coefficient for seismic situation, CA and CP are calculated. These are given in IS 1993 as well as IRC 6. Now, what is CA? It's a coefficient of active earth pressure, which includes seismic component also, dynamic component also. And these equations were developed by Mononobe Okabe in 1926 based on Coulomb's equation. So this equation has been taken from IS 1993 and IRC 6. As you can see, the active pressure force is half gamma h square, half WH square, which is a density, and C is a coefficient of dynamic active pressure, which also includes static component. Now the lambda is 10 inverse AH by 1 plus minus AV. AH is a zone factor divided by 2, that is a peak ground acceleration, and AV is a vertical component. Now this lambda is nothing but an angle which, FH makes with FV. Now FH is weight of the wedge multiplied by AH, and FV is the weight of the wedge, W plus WAV or minus AV. And if you take the resultant, then resultant makes an angle of theta or lambda with the vertical. That's what it is. And this is, incorporated in the equation, and which gives you CA value. And this is the expression for uniform surcharge if you have a, sloping back face and sloping earth. If the soil is saturated, then lambda is modified by taking saturated density. Now, this CA has two components, as I said, static components, which we know it acts as H by 3. And for surcharge, it acts as H by 2. And dynamic component, you can subtract static component from the dynamic component, but it acts as H by 2 for triangular earth pressure and 2/3 H for surcharge. If the backfill is partially submerged, then this is the diagram which we normally use. Now the first triangle which you see here, it is for totally dry backfill. In the second diagram which you see here, it is for the submerged. And you can see some terms 3CA minus KA, which we have discussed just now. And at the wherever there is a submergence, the CA and K dash are modified. CA dash and K dash both are calculated for the submerged backfill. And the final diagram is like this. And what it is, this gives us a ratio of lateral dynamic increment due to backfill with height of wall divided by vertical effective pressure. That means vertical effective pressure will keep varying along the height. And if you multiply by this increment, you straightway get lateral dynamic increment. Now this is for retained fill, and this is for surcharge. If you have a surcharge, then instead of 3, you have a 2 here. Now using these equation, we can find for a typical case, phi 30 degree, delta 20, beta 0, that's a horizontal surface, AH Z by 2. Then EV is 30% of 2/3 of AH, 0.024, KA is 0.315, CA is 0.409. Now, here, this is a static pressure due to, this is a static pressure acting at S by 2. This is a dynamic increment. I think there is some mistake here. This has to be triangular. So we have a triangular diagram, which is a static earth pressure. And then we will have a, this kind of triangular diagram, which shows dynamic increment. And this is a dynamic increment, this static increment, static pressure and dynamic increment pressure. Okay, this is a distribution of the dynamic increment. I will explain later how it comes. So in this diagram shows vertical effective pressure, gamma into H. And since this is submerged, so here the density will be gamma B, submerged density, and on top of this, this will be gamma D. So this is gamma into H, vertical pressure. Now, from the diagram which we saw just now, you can take distribution factor from that diagram. This is the level of submergence. So these are the distribution factor. And dynamic increment pressure is a basically multiplication of these two. Because this was a ratio, so you can multiply gamma H by these factor and you get this diagram. And this is a static pressure. So you have a static part, you have a dynamic increment. And by using this diagram, you can work out the final pressure. And this is a diagram for surcharge. You have a static pressure and then vertical pressure. In this case, actually this is a surcharge. This is a surcharge, not a gamma H basically. This is a surcharge. And this is a distribution factor for applicable to surcharge. And you multiply these two and you get the dynamic increment due to surcharge. And using these two diagrams, you can work out the final forces. Now, you can refer to paper 626, Indian Roads Congress Journal, published in 2014 for detailed illustration, where that is written by Mr. Alok Bhomik, and many examples have been solved. Also, commentary on IRC 6 2017 will be shortly published by IAS Takki, which gives worked example to illustrate this procedure. Now, we have a backfill resting on heel slab, and our codes do not cover this aspect. So as to cover this aspect, I will quickly explain. You are familiar with AH, and WW is the weight of the wall, base slab, and earth fill. Sorry, without earth fill. Weight of wall, base slab in case of retaining wall, and if abutment is supporting free sliding bearing, or the weight of base slab only if the abutment is supporting fixed bearing integral with superstructure. WS is weight of the soil above the heel. The total seismic force is given by P dynamic plus PIR. Now P dynamic is same what we discussed just now because of static and dynamic increment. It is the PIR which we have to understand. The PIR is AH, that is horizontal seismic coefficient, plus WW, weight of abutment, plus weight of soil. So this is basically a horizontal inertia force due to seismic loading of the wall mass. So two cases need to be investigated. In first case, take 100% of seismic earth pressure, P dynamic, with 50% of inertial force, PIR. And combine 50% of P dynamic, but not less than static active earth pressure force with 100% of PIR. And higher of these two has to be taken. And another important thing is the inertia force associated with the soil mass on the heel slab behind the retaining wall is not added to the active seismic earth pressure when structurally designing the retaining or abutment wall. That means these combinations have to be considered only for external stability, not for the wall design. And the basis for excluding this inertial force is that movement of this soil mass is assumed to be in phase with a structural wall system with the inertial load transferred through the heel slab. Now this is ASTO code, and Euro code gives slightly different recommendation. And there, if it is carrying fixed bearing, then it suggests soil abutment interaction. I think I will skip the design aspects. Most of you are familiar how to design a retaining wall. I will just show the diagram. So we normally check for sliding, overturning, soil bearing, and stability. This has to be checked if the underneath layer is a soft clay. And this diagram shows, vertical weight of different components, soil, fill, wall, base. And we calculate the CG of the entire vertical load with respect to the center and find out the eccentricity E. So the moment at the base due to weight is W into E, and normally it should act opposite to the external earth pressure. So as I explained earlier, when you are designing stem, the earth pressure diagram has to be taken here. If you are designing for external stability, diagram has to be taken outside. And once we calculate total weight, this is the base width. So vertical pressure will be W by B, and W into eccentricity by sectional modulus. This bearing pressure should be less than the permissible. Then we work out overall external moments, which is overturning moment. That is sigma horizontal force into their height from the base. Resisting moment is total weight, and it's a CG from the toe. So that's a restoring moment, and ratio of MO with the MR is a factor of safety against overturning. And as per IRC 78, it should be more than 2. Similarly, sliding is total external horizontal force divided by friction coefficient into weight of total weight. And this should be more than 1.5 for non-seismic case, 1.25 for seismic case. Sometimes we have to provide shear keys also if the height is very large and the subsoil is poor, coefficient of base friction is low. In that case, we provide a shear key so that we can get more passive relief. If there's a very poor clay layer below the good strata, then failure may take place, like this, and we have to be careful of that, check for that. Now, structural design, all of you are familiar, most of you, but we have to be careful. Then when we design a vertical wall, the critical section for bending and shear will be at the base of the wall, not at D effective or something like that. Similarly, heel slab, generally net downward pressure acts, and here also critical section for bending moment and shear have to be taken at the face of the wall. In toe slab, the critical section is at the face of the wall, but shear may be taken at D effective from face of stem. Now, as you have seen, there is a very large variety of structure, and for each one, the procedure is different, and I am not covering that here. Abutments, I've already discussed. These are designed for earth pressure, and in addition are designed for loads transfer through superstructure. Drainage of earth retaining structure is very important. We have already seen if there is no drainage arrangement, the earth pressure will be very high, and we provide weep holes to dissipate the hydrostatic pressure, or sometimes we provide a perforated drain, a drain pipe at the base. We provide a geotextile or a filter media behind the wall, and this longitudinal drain pipe should have an outlet or should have intermediate weep hole connected to the longitudinal drain pipe. You can see some weep holes here. In this case, there is a longitudinal pipe, and this is connected to weep holes only at one level. It shows the drainage arrangement, and drainage arrangement is not sufficient to provide a filter or a pipe. The backfill has to be granular and should meet the specification. That is very important. If you don't provide drainage arrangement, I have explained already, the hydrostatic pressure has to be considered, and with proper drainage arrangement, then this need not be considered. In RE wall, there are certain issues concerning drainage. Now, RE wall sometimes are very long, and we have to provide a downtake pipe at a regular interval to drain off the water. If the RE wall is provided at the edge, then a gully has to be provided at the edge so that water is collected through chute drain and disposed of. Otherwise, it will seep through and reduce the shear strength. So if weep holes are not done properly, if the filter media is defective, then the weeping is too much and soil starts coming out. Retaining wall may fail for various reasons. Now, these are the possible reasons. Saturated backfill instead of assumed dry backfill, weep holes that don't weep, design errors, then calculation error, unanticipated increased loads, mistakes in utilizing software, detailing errors, and improper reinforcement placement. These are the real reasons I have myself encountered many such errors. Because of lack of time, I will not be able to tell you. Then foundation issues, inadequate specification and notes, shoddy construction, and then age of retaining wall. If this age increases, then these factors may come subsequently. And earthquake, seismic forces underestimated, or liquefaction of the backfill. So I will skip through these. I mean, these are well known. Now, when I say failure due to foundation issue, sometimes you have a very weak strata here near the toe, and wall may rotate, or it may happen on the heel side also if there is a soft clay or very soft strata. Then due to age, there may be a deterioration of quality of material, then change in earth fill property saturated against dry earth fill, or additional hydrostatic pressure, which was not anticipated, additional loads due to increased surcharge, not anticipated, increase in earthquake forces, and change in drainage condition, clogging of weep holes, etc. So weep holes or any drainage system also requires regular maintenance. Failure during earthquake happens due to large inertia forces and changes in soil strength, which may cause permanent deformation. The liquefaction may occur in submerged earth fill or even in subsoil. Failure, whether by sliding, tilting, bending, or some other mechanism, occurs when these permanent deformations become excessive. Here you see a failed retaining wall in Kobe earthquake. Failure of RE walls is very common, and these may include reasons of failure may be same as for conventional walls. Other reasons may be inadequate connection of geogrids with fascia panel, tension and pull-out failure of geogrids. It is not recommended for submerged area. Then differential settlement. If the cross wall behind abutment, which I showed you, which was 47 meters long, may partly rest on pile cap, partly on soil, there may be differential settlement and detailing omissions. Now, what are detailing omissions? This, with my experience, I have noticed that certain details are simply not given by RE wall agency, and structural consultant also do not specify this. So in this case, this is a dirt wall and this is a cross retaining RE wall, and there has to be a gap between top of RE wall and the approach slab. There have been cases when this gap was missing or this was not given in the drawing, and the weight of and the approach slab was cast on top of this, and some panel got dislodged. In this case, this is a friction slab, and this gap between bottom and top of RE wall has to be maintained, and drawing show this detail very, very clearly. And this is a case where approach slab is coming. Now this detail is missing from most of the drawing. See, so when there is an approach slab, the detailing has to be a little different. As you can see, it has been detailed differently, but this gap has to be ensured. You can see a RE wall here where there is a bulging, and this has been, treated with soil nailing. Shrinkage and temperature cracks are common, particularly in long retaining wall. Now, these happen because of restraint. If you are constructing a long retaining wall, it is not free to shrink. There is a loss of moisture, and it is held by the base slab. Since it is not free to shrink, it will develop the cracks. Another reason is if there is a thick wall and there is a high heat of hydration in the center and outside is cold, then there is a temperature gradient which is set up between these two surfaces, which leads to the cracking. And you can see the pattern of cracks. How to avoid these cracks? Now, vertical control joints and horizontal reinforcements are normally used to control cracks in the walls. For this reason, codes specify a minimum horizontal reinforcement of the 0.25% of concrete area in RCC wall. The spacing of control joints depends on amount of horizontal reinforcement. Larger spacing requires heavier reinforcement. See, this is a contraction joint or a control joint. You can give a small, gap here and facilitate the shrinkage cracks over here. And this is particularly useful in very long retaining wall, which may be 50, 60, 80, 100 meter. One has to be careful of the shear keys. And this is an expansion joint, may be provided generally at 20 to 25 meter. But all these details are normally not given in retaining wall drawings. Here you see a crack control joint, notch on either side. And this is an artificial location of shrinkage cracks. And this is a water bar. Wherever you provide expansion joint, it's better to provide a water bar. Or you may provide shrinkage gaps filled with some flexible material. So last slide, the vertical contraction joints at interval of 8 to 12 meter may be provided. These are formed by placing narrow vertical strips on the outer stem face form so that a vertical groove is developed when the concrete hardens. The groove produces a plane of weakness to locate tension cracks. In long walls, expansion joints may be provided at about 25 meter to 25 meter spacing. That's it from my side. Thank you very much for your patience.
Thank you very much, Rajiv. Excellent presentation.
Excellent.
Very wonderful and insightful presentation. Very informative. And I think I'm amazed at the kind of coverage, wide coverage that you have given in such a short time. Very nice. I think moderator, Dr. Anil Sheth, may now please take it forward. Question answer.
Thank you very much, sir, for your great presentations. Thoroughly enjoyed. Now I'll take the few questions that have come up. Vinayak Samantha wants to know how we apply the force for design in retaining walls. I believe you have answered, but if you can.
No, how we apply the lateral force?
Yes, I think. See,
we have to be aware of the lateral earth pressure diagrams. See, retaining walls are designed for active earth pressure, which is generally a triangular diagram. And then we have to see whether it's a dry backfill or it's a submerged backfill or a combination of two. So I have shown in my presentation how the earth pressure diagram will look like. And in bridges, we also design for live load surcharge, which is a rectangular diagram. Now you work out the force. Say, suppose if it is a triangular diagram, then the base pressure is gamma Ka gamma into H. That's the base pressure. You take average of these two, Ka gamma H by 2, that's the average pressure, multiplied by the height and multiplied by the unit width. So that will give you force per meter. For surcharge also, you can do same thing. The base pressure is KAQ, and since it is uniform, then you can multiply KAQ by the height by unit width. That's a force. Let's call it F2, and first one was F1. Now F1, as per IRC, for dry fill, it is taken at 0.42 H above the base. So F1 into 0.42 H plus F2 into H by 2. That's how you calculate the active pressure. And if you have a hydrostatic pressure, then the base will be simply gamma W by H, and you work out the force will be gamma W H by 2 into H. You have to multiply by the area, and its CG is 1/3 of H from the base. Add up all these things, and you will get forces, and you will also get the overturning moment.
Next question by Mr. Kaushlesh Damgi. In case of integral bridge, how to calculate K star to consider the special effects?
See, K star formula is given in our code. It depends upon the displacement of the deck. See, when there is a displacement of the superstructure deck, it pushes the earth fill. The earth fill was earlier at K0 condition, at rest condition, where Ka is 0.5 only or 0.6, whatever. And when you push the wall, this is modified, and depending on the extent of the displacement, there is a formula given in IRC, I think SP 114, and that is more than 0.5 or 0.6 and less than Kp will lie somewhere around 1 to 2. One has to look into this reference. And the distribution of K star also, it remains constant up to H by 2 if integral bridge has a open foundation, and if wall has is embedded into the ground, then this will remain constant up to 2/3 of H from top.
There is a question on should we consider the soil mass in calculation of time period?
Well, this is a very tricky question. See, there are two approaches. I have shown you ASTO approach. In ASTO approach, we simply take seismic coefficient, horizontal seismic coefficient as Z by 2. That's where Z is a peak ground acceleration. We take it Z by 2, multiply with mass of the soil, and the CG of soil mass can be taken at CG of the soil. And this is a simplified calculation. And then you make two combinations, which I showed. Whereas Eurocode is different. It says in Eurocode, you have to do soil abutment interaction. You have to provide springs, and consider, like we do in sometimes pile, we provide springs and analyze for soil foundation interaction. Similarly, soil abutment interaction you have to analyze, and in that case, the seismic coefficient also will be evaluated from there. That's a very complicated approach. I think I will prefer we go by ASTO.
Are the factor of safety for sliding and overturning after using the combination factors in IRC 6 Annexure B?
Yes, that's right. See, whatever factor of safety I showed, those were based on IRC 78, where all the loads are unfactored. There is no factor. But if you are using table B1 of IRC 6, then the factor of safety has to be more than 1. That's it. Because their overturning moments are multiplied by higher load factor, whereas stabilizing moments are multiplied by lower factors, and the ratio can be 1 or more than 1.
There's few more. Should weep holes be provided only up to the ground level in front or for full depth?
No, this should not be provided up to full depth. This should be provided up to water table. See, if you know the rise of water table, it has to be below water table only, because this has to dissipate. And if there is a HFL, like in river bridges, our abutments are subjected to HFL, and these have to be provided below HFL.
Is it desirable, this is a question by Mr. Pavan Kumar, is it desirable to have retaining earth wall where there is not proper drainage and possibility of water percolation in the approach? What happens? And if RE wall is designed for hydrostatic pressure, is it acceptable? And if RE wall is designed for hydrostatic pressure, can we still allow RE wall in such case?
No, RE wall should not be designed for submerged cases. That is very clear. Our codes are also, I think, very clear. You should not design RE wall where there is a possibility of development of hydrostatic earth pressure, because it will reduce the shear strength drastically. And the first question, where you are not providing weep holes, that means you are not providing any drainage arrangement, and there's a possibility of heavy percolation. If there's a possibility, like if you're constructing city area, a VUP, you need not give weep holes, because you have a surface at the paved surface at the top, and then you may have return walls. The possibility of seepage of water from top is very, very less. So there you need not give weep holes, which look very ugly in urban environment. Or if you have to give, you can give just a single row at the bottom. But where there's a possibility of heavy percolation, and if you don't want to give weep holes, then it has to be designed for hydrostatic pressure in addition to normal earth pressure.
Mr. Kaushlesh Dangi also wants to know when we have to analyze retaining wall for seismic case.
Always. Only thing is, I think our code says in zone 2 probably it need not be designed, but in all zones it should be designed, because the effect of earthquake forces is tremendous. If you solve a problem, you take dynamic increment, the coefficient may be almost 1.5 times of the normal coefficient, and if you add seismic force on surcharge also, and earth fill, and for earth fill we are taking peak ground acceleration Z by 2. The end result maybe forces may be extremely high. So we should not ignore these forces, seismic forces.
There's another, what is the SA by G to be taken for short and rigid retaining walls in longitudinal direction? IRC 6 says that we can consider 1 G. However, IRC SP 114 gives 2.5 G for time period of 0 seconds when using elastic spectrum method.
Normally, see, if the time period is very low, let's relate it with the time period. If I remember, there is a amendment issued. If the time period is less than, I think, 0.03 second, then SA by G has to be taken 1, but response reduction factor also will be 1. Whereas if you take 2.5, then response reduction factor can be 3. So that's the major difference.
Somebody wants to know what are all the IS codes for designing retaining wall. Also related to it, there are some questions on resources, as in what is the best book for retaining wall and what are the softwares for retaining wall. So codes, books and software.
Unfortunately, we do not have a code which is fully devoted to the retaining wall. We have a code for RE wall. We have a code which is based on IS British code 8006, but unfortunately we don't have a code for RCC retaining walls or counterforts. One has to refer to the books, and that is the only way out. But in most of the books, conventional retaining wall examples have been presented, whether it's a counterfort type or a normal retaining wall. All these examples you will find in the books. And what was the next question?
So, sir, can you suggest one book, or and then the other question was the softwares for the retaining wall?
Software, there are a number of software for slope stability, for design of sheet piles, for design of diaphragm walls, design of retaining walls, stability failure. I think GeoSolve is one of them, but if you search on the web, you will find many such softwares are available, and some of them are free also.
This one, another question by Mr. Inderjit Ghai. Is longitudinal reinforcement discontinued on crack inducer joint? Is joint provided in raft of the long wall?
See, raft, it doesn't matter. Raft can be continuous because it is hidden. Only wall, nobody wants to see cracks. I have seen number of cracks, and as a designer, I got into problem also. In one case, client called me, fired me left and right because there were number of shrinkage cracks. I told him these are shrinkage cracks, these are harmless. I gave my explanation, but he was simply not satisfied. He said nobody wants to see the cracks. And these cracks are sometimes very fine. It's not easy to grout them. And the problem is more common for long wall, thick walls, where there's a substantial temperature difference outside and inside. And so one has to take care. If the wall length is long, thick wall, one has to take care of these things.
Yeah. Nikita Sirohi wants to know if pre-stressing can be done for retaining walls also.
I don't think that is necessary. Why it should be necessary? If you want to do, you can do. But I mean, if the bending moments are unmanageable, then yes, it will help. I mean, theoretically, yes, it will help. But I don't think it is a common practice or it is even a practice.
Mr. Nishant Chandilia wants to know, while designing retaining wall for clayey soils, do we consider shrinkage cracks and depth of cracks?
See, the first suggestion is never use clay backfill. It has many problems. It may be expensive clay, which will increase the pressure. If you want to use, you can use. There are theories for that. I have shown you theory for clay, but these are not preferred. I don't think we should fill up with the clay soil.
Yeah.
It should be free draining material, which will drain the water also.
Yeah. Mr. Jatin Lumba wants to know, how could we decide about the type of earth retaining structures required for a particular site condition? Whether retaining wall, RE wall, wing wall, or any other type to be used?
Yeah, very good question. There are many considerations. See, in some bridges, you have to provide a return wall. Now the length of return wall may be 10 meter, 15 meter. Nobody will, and river bridges, of course, you cannot provide RE wall as a return wall. So there you have to provide RCC wall. So that solves the problem. And in some other structure like flyovers or ROBs, if the length of return wall is only small, 20 meter, 30 meter, and RE wall agencies are not interested in smaller length unless they have a long ramp. If you have a long ramp, say 500 meter, 600 meter, even 300 meter, and sufficient number of structure, RE wall agency are willing to do it. And then the major reason is, one is the cost, of course. RE walls are much cheaper than RCC retaining wall. And the other biggest advantage is the speed of construction is very fast. You need not excavate for foundation. It can be constructed in a busy area without disturbing the traffic, if any, on the service roads. RE wall has many advantages, and that's why it has become popular in terms of cost, time, ease of construction. But the quality is very important. In RCC wall, there are lesser factors to be considered for safety, whereas in RE wall, there are many more factors to be considered for safe design and safe construction.
Mr. Rangaraj Subramanian wants to know if we have to consider active earth pressure condition for box culvert design.
See, what happens, see, if the box culvert is buried and the compaction and filling has been done parallelly from both sides, then there is no question of active earth pressure. But yes, there may be some situation. For example, if a heavy braking force or longitudinal force is acting on top of the box, it will push the box on one side and it will get detached from the other side. So in that case, active pressure may develop. So there is a publication, British publication, which gives solution for this. I mean, if you are having a heavy braking or tractive force, on one side you can consider active pressure at rest, and on the other side you can consider active pressure, normal active pressure, and it gives a range. So in certain situation, yes, but not from both sides. That is not possible.
In case the retaining walls are located next to adjacent properties like buildings, do we need to take building surcharge load? That is the distance between face of the retaining wall to building foundation.
Yeah, you should take. If it is sufficiently away, then obviously you need not take. But you will find some guidelines for this. You apply a surcharge at some distance and take a dispersion line, maybe at a 45-degree line, and then you can work out its effect. We must take, yes.
Next, Ms. Neelam Narvaria wants to know, can we provide stepped retaining wall when it is not feasible to provide retaining earth wall due to any restriction, and what height it can be stepped?
By stepped, I understand the thickness is varied. Am I right? See, when you say stepped retaining wall, what exactly it means? See, we normally provide a retaining wall either of constant thickness if the height is small. If the height is large, then one face is vertical and other face is sloping. Now, if you say stepped, I understand the thickness at base is more, and then suddenly it is reduced to lesser thickness. So, is that the question?
I would think yes.
No, if you want to provide stepped, it can be on compression side. On tension side, it is better to provide a vertical face because tension reinforcement can then be properly provided. The step should be provided outside. But for some reason, if you have to provide towards earth fill, then the detailing has to be proper because at the embedment of the vertical bars has to be ensured. Proper anchorage length has to be given because then you are not able to provide a continuous reinforcement right of the top in one plane. These are in different planes, so anchorage has to be ensured.
Then Mr. Alok Rathod wants to know how much soil mass should be considered for seismic effects in case of AASHTO, especially in case of long wing walls.
Well, AASHTO recommends the weight coming on the heel. Just behind that, the weight which is resting on the heel, because when there is an earthquake, the ground moves, and along with that, the base slab also moves. So it is the weight of soil resting on the base slab, not beyond that.
Sudipta Das wants to know, in dynamic earth pressure, whether the seismic coefficient is considered with response reduction factor or not.
No, it is Z by 2. There is no response reduction. See, let's understand what is the response reduction factor. You have a pier and you have a wall which carries a fixed bearing or integral with the superstructure. When the earthquake comes, the ground shakes. There is a ground acceleration. But because of the large height, the pier or any column also oscillates. So in that process of oscillation, the energy is dissipated. And then we take advantage of that. And the detailing also is, it is designed for ductility, which means there may be a plastic hinge at the bottom, and there are many other criteria for designing this as a ductile structure. And since it oscillates, it dissipates the energy, and we reduce the seismic forces. Basically, we reduce the Z by 2 or acceleration, ground acceleration by a certain factor, and due to ductility and flexibility of the structure. And that's why we take R. Whereas if the soil fill is resting on base slab and it doesn't oscillate, it just moves with the base slab. That's why we take ground acceleration for this. We will not take any R on this soil.
Mr. Inderjit Khai wants to know, should weep holes be provided in RCC box culvert walls? How will this behave when box culvert is running full?
We should not provide. The reason is, if you provide weep holes inside, then water is flowing inside at HFL, and then water will have a reverse. It will go to rather soil backfill rather than coming out. So because box culvert are designed to carry water from a stream. So these will be flooded only when there is a water. And otherwise in normal situation, it may not happen. So we should not provide weep holes in box culvert, but yes, we should design for saturated fill, which means with a density of 2, that we should do.
Can we consider passive resistance of front soil in abutment on river shore if river protection work is provided?
Yes, our code permits that. So if you are protecting the embankment, I mean at the abutment location through a stone pitching, properly designed stone pitching, and in river with a properly designed launching apron, I showed you a photograph of 2 superstructure, and very heavy production has been done. So once you do that, you have taken care of scouring through a launching apron. And in that case, scour condition need not be considered.
How to decide that return wall and retaining wall both can provide in box culvert and pipe culvert?
How to decide? No, these are integral part of these structures. See, why we provide return wall or wing wall? Why do we provide? There is a road formation behind that, and when it reaches the structure, if you don't provide this wall, the earth slope embankment will, close the opening. It will come in front of opening. By constructing a wing wall, we are stopping that embankment spill. And the return wall, we are allowing the spill to happen, but by the edge of the structure. I mean, clear waterway is not obstructed. So these are must. And the guideline is, if you provide return wall, its length has to be height of formation multiplied by the slope of the earth, because the spilling starts from the edge of the return wall. And wing wall also, it has a maximum height at abutment location, and then it keeps reducing as you reach the ground, because earth spill also keeps, height of earth spill also keeps reducing. And when you reach the ground level, you provide some minimum height of wing wall. So both are necessary.
I'll take the last two questions now, although there may be many others in the chat box. One is, should importance factor be considered in CA calculation along with Z/2?
No, it is not to be considered.
Okay. Then by Mr. Jatin Singla, there is a question. What is good in practice, either to construct a earth retaining abutment or retaining earth by RE wall and constructing non-earth retaining abutment?
You mean to say bank seat abutments? Is that the question? Because
question is, what is a better practice, to construct earth retaining abutment or retaining earth by RE wall and constructing non-earth retaining abutment?
no, it depends upon the situation, you know. See, when you say non-retaining abutment, it basically means the superstructure is resting on the piers. We may call it abutment pier, but these are essentially piers. It's independently supported. And just behind that, you construct an independent structure to retain the earth. Now, that can be in RCC or RE wall. It depends upon situation. As I said, if there is a submergence, then we should avoid RE wall structure. And if there is no submergence, you can provide RE wall. And if the length is short, where no RE wall fellow wants to come, then you will have to construct RCC wall. So there is, it depends on the situation. So, you must have noticed that in most of the flyovers in urban area, you have an independent pier, and just behind that you have a RE wall structure, and the gap is filled with a gap slab and approach slab. So that has become very, very common. And I showed you even in rivers it is done. The independent returns are also constructed behind the abutment piers.
There are many more questions, but I think we have taken enough time from you, sir. What I can do is I will just take all the questions in the and email to Rajiv Ahuja, sir. And maybe we will try, because there are so many of them, we'll try to see if we can manage to have upload it on our website and do a question answer session or something like that.
Sure, so, we can do that. We can.
Yeah. Okay. So I think that with this, I just request Alok sir to say a note of thanks, and then we will close.
Thank you very much, Rajiv, for such an excellent presentation, a treatise on the entire gamut of abutments and retaining walls. I think the amount of information that you have provided just in one and a half hours is really praiseworthy. And I'm sure the participants, I can see the chat box, which is full of praises. And I think all the participants are looking forward to having this recording of today's presentation, or a copy of handouts of your presentation. And I think it shows how much interesting it was. Thank you very much. And we look forward to many more such webinars.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you. Thank you
Rajiv
all.
Sir, and from all the participants and myself.
Thank you. I thank all. I thank Dr. Anil, Alok Bhaumik, and who have made this possible. And thank you all the participants. You know, today being Sunday and too many webinars are going on, and they have taken out time and attended this. Thank you very much. And I will try to answer all the questions. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, sir. Sir, you may, since you are the host right now for presentation, you may end the meeting.
Okay.